capital.
Turn left.
In 2 hours' time, polls will open here, ending the tightest election race in years.
That's a cap. After the news.
In 400 meters, turn right.
Hello, this is Julie Castle with BBC News. The Houthis have said that British and American strikes against them in Yemen will not go without punishment or retaliation. The group says 5 of its fighters were killed and 6 were injured in the night. US Central Command has said more than 60 Houthi military targets were struck in response to attacks on ships in the Red Sea, as Jonathan Beale explains.
Once the West had said, stop this, or else, they had to do the or else. And this is the or else. But to be honest, there aren't many other options other than this. There's no suggestion in an election year they're going to put boots on the ground. The West, they have bitter experience of both Iraq, Afghanistan. So this is pretty much what they can do. They can do it at bigger scale if they want to, but this is pretty much all they can do in terms of military action.
Russia has called the strikes illegitimate and requested an urgent meeting at the UN Security Council. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the US and Britain were trying to turn the Red Sea into
Turn
a sea
right,
of blood.
then turn left.
Israel has called on judges at the International Court of Justice to throw out the case brought by South Africa, alleging that it's committing genocide in Gaza. On the second and final day of hearings at the UN's highest court, lawyers acting for Israel argued that demands by South Africa for a stop to the offensive in Gaza lacked any merit. The legal advisor to Israel's foreign ministry, Carl Becker, said South Africa's allegations did not reflect reality.
The applicant has regrettably put before the court a profoundly distorted factual and legal picture. The entirety of its case hinges on a deliberately curated, decontextualized,
Turn right,
manipulative description
then turn left.
of the reality of current hostilities.
South Africa has accused the highest levels of the Israeli state of nurturing genocidal intent against Palestinians in Gaza. A statue of the late South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu wearing a Palestinian scarf has been unveiled in Cape Town to symbolize his support for the Palestinian cause. The Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation said the statue would be on show until the bombing of Gaza stops. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is on a rare visit to Ukraine to meet President Zelensky. The trip follows Britain's announcement that Ukraine will get more than $3 billion in military aid. Here's Ian Watson.
This will buy thousands of more drones for the Ukrainian armed forces, but also continuing to provide long-range missiles and, of course, air defences
Turn
against
left.
those Russian attacks too. Given the tussle in Congress in America over funding for Ukraine, I think Rishi Sunak wanted to make it very clear that finance would continue to be given to Ukraine in the coming financial year.
World News from the BBC. The World Health Organization has declared Cape Verde free of malaria, hailing it as a significant milestone in the fight against the disease. The archipelago off the coast of West Africa had faced severe epidemics in densely populated areas in the past, but has implemented specific interventions. The WHO's Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said the news gives us hope that we can dare to dream of a malaria-free world. Police in Spain have announced that they've arrested 22 ecological activists accused of causing damage worth more than $500,000 in protests across the country. They belong to the group Vegetable Future, which advocates civil disobedience to fight climate change. Danny Eberhardt, our Europe Regional Editor, reports.
The arrests took place
In 300
cities across
meters,
Spain in December.
turn left.
3 of those detained are allegedly Vegetable Future's leaders. They're accused of running a criminal organisation, a charge mocked by the group's supporters. The estimate for damages stems from direct action, including throwing paint at buildings like the Lower House of Parliament and Ministry of Agriculture, as well as blocking key roads and invading airport runways in Ibiza and Madrid. It does not include damage to artworks in museums such as the Prado.
Turn left.
The Indian Defence Ministry says it believes it's found wreckage from a military transport plane which went missing over the Bay of Bengal nearly 8 years ago. 29 people were on board the aircraft, which lost contact after taking off from a base near Chennai. The debris was discovered by a deep-sea drone surveying the ocean floor. In football, the Men's Asian Cup kicks off in Qatar later on Friday, with the hosts and defending champions taking on Lebanon in the opening match. 24 teams are taking part. Japan are the clear favourites to win a record 5th title. The Palestinian team are also competing amid intense media scrutiny. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour. It's coming to you live from the BBC World Service with me, Ken Franks, in London, and in about 15 minutes you'll hear from Celia Hatton in Taiwan. For the last 3 months or so, Yemen's Houthi militia have been attacking commercial ships sailing through the Red Sea. Early today, Friday, the US and UK military hit back. Footage provided by the UK Ministry of Defence of Royal Air Force jets taking off to bomb Houthi positions inside Yemen. 60 effectively targeted. The Iran-backed militia group, which now controls a large swathe of Yemen, has been attacking commercial vessels with drones and ballistic missiles since Israel began its war in Gaza following some mass massacres in early October. In November, the Houthis also hijacked and continue to hold 1 cargo ship. Why then has the Western response come now? This was the British Armed Forces Minister James Heappey speaking to the BBC today.
We felt that the targets prosecuted last night were limited, proportionate, necessary to disrupt the Houthi capability to attack shipping in the Red Sea. And it's important, I think, to make the point that no matter what you think about the narrative that the Houthis put out about this, sympathy and solidarity with the Hamas cause, the world cannot be held to ransom with the Houthis deliberately seeking to deny the movement of commercial shipping through a seaway that routinely moves around 20% of global trade.
The British Armed Forces Minister James Heappey. Jane Kinnerman is with us today. She's Director of Policy and Impact at the European Leadership Network and a Middle East specialist. Jane, very good to have you on the programme. Several dozen targets then that were hit. A few Houthis have been killed, we're told. What do you take of not just the fact of this, these strikes by the British and American military, but also the extent of it?
The UK's got a delicate balancing act here because both the UK and the US want to repel these attacks on shipping. At the same time, it's part of a wider picture of regional conflict where the US
In 300 meters,
wants to avoid,
turn right.
kind of uncontrolled escalation that might draw in Iran and Hezbollah. So it wants to be able to escalate, but not too much. That's where it's very tricky. They've concluded that striking these targets could be done in a limited way.
Turn right.
Won't provoke much wider violence.
Right, well, we'll hear how the Houthis may respond in a moment. But just remind us, first of all, if you can, I mean, I know it's a long history, but if you can give us a very potted history of who the Houthis are.
So the Houthis have been on a remarkable trajectory over the last 2 decades. 20 years ago this was a small group of guerrillas active in northern Yemen where they were fighting against the Yemeni government. They're from the Zaidi Shia minority. They felt that they should have more power and more religious rights and so on. But 10 years ago they managed to take power in Yemen when there was a political transition there. They essentially carried out a coup. They were then attacked by a Saudi-led coalition who did not want this group, who were rapidly becoming closer and closer to Iran, being on the Saudi borders. Saudi Arabia and the Houthis are now in the middle of a peace process which was helping to stabilise Yemen, but the Gaza war has enabled the Houthis to take this opportunity to show what they can do on the Red Sea at a time when they've got significant political support in the Arab world, where there's a growing frustration that Western countries are not able to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza or help the Palestinians even to access basic food and water.
Jane, for the time being, thank you very much. We managed to get through to one resident of Sana'a in Yemen. She is Radia Al-Mutawakil. She says that the missile strikes made for a fearful night.
Yesterday we heard
explosions that took us back to the beginning of the war. It was terrifying for Yemenis if this is a new circle of a war while they still stuck in the first circle of the war and they still didn't even get over it. People they don't know if it is one-time airstrikes, if it is going on to what extent it's going to expand. So it was a very bad night for all Yemenis. It was like they are showing off more than they are just targeting the real military targets. This is what the sense that the Yemenis got from the airstrikes yesterday.
When you said that you're concerned that you may be sort of going back to the worst dark days of war, and there's been so many terrible moments of conflict over the last pretty much 10 years, do you think that this is something now which is sort of more likely than not, or do you think there's a chance that the Western military have shown their displeasure with what the Houthis are doing, and that will be it?
After 8 and 9 years of war, of a very strong military campaign, Houthis are stronger and are able to send rockets to the Red Sea. So a new circle of a war will get what? It is a very risky adventure that will just cause another disaster because Yemen, it's known now that it's like the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and we are still there. We're in a place where there is no war, no peace, and the situation in Yemen is still very bad for civilians. This will never be a solution for what's happening in the Red Sea.
President of the Yemeni capital Sana'a, speaking to me just a little bit earlier. How are the Houthis themselves likely to respond? Hussein al-Bukhaiti is a Yemeni journalist based also in Sana'a who describes himself as a Houthi supporter. Tell me
In 200 meters, turn left.
Is the damage?
I don't think it will have any effect because, to be honest with you, in Saudi Arabia and the coalition supported by the UK and US have launched
Turn left.
a 9-year war against Yemen. They have conducted hundreds of thousands of airstrikes during this 8 years of war. And what was the result? Yemeni army, or as they call them, Ansarullah the Houthi, they become stronger. They have more sophisticated weapons, have the ability to launch attacks in many areas, including the entire Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. So this means that wars and strikes actually is making them stronger.
What do you think will be the Houthi response to this?
The Houthi response clearly, as the leader of Ansarullah the Houthi have said, he said any attack on Yemen, it will result in an attack on all the passengers and the interests of countries who are involved in attacking Yemen and the countries as well in the area. And at one point he said the commercial ships of those countries might as well come under attack. And yesterday as well in his speech before the attack he has warned any attack on Yemen will result in a huge attack on all the passengers, specifically of those countries like United Kingdom and as well the United States. But of course, if the United States and United Kingdom will continue attacking Yemen, I'm sure that the next step it will be to target commercial ships linked or belong to UK company or as well to United States company. Because as they say here as well, according to international law, if you are in a war with a country, you have the right to stop and to search or to sink any ship, even commercial ship, if you think that it is your enemy. And of course, all the ships that belong to United Kingdom and UK and United States might come as well under attack.
Well, you mentioned international law. What in that case do you make of the fact that this week the Security Council has passed a resolution which condemns, and I quote, in the strongest terms, the at least 2 dozen Houthi attacks on merchant and commercial vessels since November and demands that the Houthis immediately cease all such attacks?
No, they told because I thought that the Council in 2015 was called 2216 has supported the Saudi war and as well the blockade on Yemen. And here they say the Houthi official and Houthi military commander, they say all UN Security Council resolution is under our feet because they all know, as they say, that this UN Security Council is controlled by those Western countries. And just imagine...
Well, hang on. The UN Security Council is not controlled by Western countries. China and Russia both have vetoes. They didn't use their vetoes.
that's the thing. I mean, they haven't used the vetoes, but they abstained. So that the resolution.
So this resolution
was
passed. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you are the person who invoked international law. The Security Council has clearly said that these attacks are against international law.
But I believe it could be better if the Security Council says that Israel should stop its genocide. And Yemeni here, they say they will please order attack against Israeli linked ship or ships headed towards Israel. That's a simple demand. And this demand is to lift the blockade against Gaza and allow food and medicine and fuel and water to enter Gaza. And this demand actually is the same demand of the Security General of the United Nations, the same demand of the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UNICEF. They all demanded to allow food and medicine. So it is so simple. Why United States want to militarize the Red Sea, want to put the international service in danger by conducting this type of attack against Yemen? They could just simply force Israel to allow food and medicine and fuel to enter Gaza as it's needed for the civilian population.
So, Haiti pro-Houthi Yemeni jet speaking with Sam, the Middle East expert Jane Kinnemont is still with us. Jane, do you think this has been war-gamed by British and American military planners? I mean, there is that sort of sense that, despite all the dire warnings, that northern front between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon hasn't quite exploded into sort of the terrible summer theory. But do you think that there are sort of similar controls at work with this front?
These developments are newer, so it's harder to predict what will happen with the Houthis than with Hezbollah, which is better known. But I do think one of the interesting elements of the interview that you've just done is that the demand being expressed there is for food, fuel, medicine, etc. to be allowed back into Gaza rather than a ceasefire. So it's quite interesting because that is potentially something that could be done. We'll see what the International Court of Justice says today, but it's possible that they might ask for measures also including the entry of these vital humanitarian supplies into Gaza, and maybe there could be something that is a diplomatic, peaceful solution to all of this.
And just briefly, Jane, I mean, the implications of all this for there to be an end to the civil war inside Yemen?
Probably sets it back, especially if this continues and creates more division. But it seems for now that quite a lot of Yemenis who don't normally like the Houthis are expressing some sympathy with what they do, because there is a lot of Yemeni solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Jane Kinnemont, great to have you back on News Hour. Thank you very much for joining us. Coming up on the programme very shortly, we'll be joining Celia Hatton in Taiwan, and also a bit later, how those who run the prisons in Ecuador are struggling to cope with the rampant gang violence.
Hemos vivido como cuerpo de...
As the prison security force, we've had to, and excuse my language, prostitute ourselves between institution and institution. We're without logistics, without kit, there's no uniforms, there's no protective gear, there's no strategy.
No hay logística, no hay...
That in just over 10 minutes. Headlines this hour: the Houthis have vowed to retaliate against American and British strikes on their positions in Yemen. They say they won't stop targeting ships in the Red Sea. Iran, Russia and Turkey have condemned the US-led attacks.